Welcome back to Spirit Portal with me, Erika Anderson, and I'm so glad you're here today. I am thrilled beyond measure to have Eimear Burke here today with me, who is an amazing person with so much wisdom, and this is why. She is the chosen chief of the Order of the Bards, Ovates and Druids. She's a priestess of the Fellowship of Isis and the priestess of Danu. And then there's all of your everyday things, just a little bit of decades of being a psychotherapist. Is that accurate to
I'm a
describe
counseling
it?
psychologist still
Uh,
in private practice. Yeah.
yes. And the reason I am so excited to meet you is I have been going through a spiritual awakening for about 5 years. I'm on one end of it, and I'm sure there's many more to come. But in my spiritual awakening, I went back into this place of being able to communicate with spirit and spirits, and really dove deep into the medicine of the spirits of the land as well, um, working with the tree energy and honoring the water and honoring the air. And I go on these beautiful meditative walks. And as I was going through this awakening of being so deep into nature and really that bringing me back into the true essence of myself, I started really feeling and becoming curious about my ancestors and wondering if this relationship was something my ancestors had. And in that, it brought me to Ireland, where my great grandfather came from, and then many, many people from that relationship in County Kerry. And I started looking for other people who had more wisdom and had more knowledge and could be some sort of guiding light. And that's how I came across you on Instagram of all places. And I was so just excited to find you and to see even your leadership position that you have in this order that is representing tens of thousands of people around the world. And you probably know if it's even more than that. Um, and then I started looking into your websites and learning more about Druidry. And so, with that, I just wanted to welcome you and give you a little bit of my background as to why it matters that you're here. I feel like you're representing such a part of my personal ancestry, and I'm sure so many people around the world feel the same when they talk to you. So, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Erica, and lovely to meet you.
It's so lovely to meet you. So I guess the first basic question that probably everybody asks, but I really truly am curious, is how did you get on this path? Can you tell me about your journey and what that's been like for you?
Well, I come from, which would be a typical Irish family, Roman Catholic. I come from the Midlands, rural area, and my mother particularly, very, very religious. She's still alive, and but I was never religious. I mean, we had to go to mass every day, and I remember making my communion. It didn't touch me at all. But when I was 9, we were in religion class, and the nun was talking about God, and it occurred to me that that God didn't exist. Now I panicked because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to go to hell now because of even thinking that thought. But it never went away. So for many, many years, I was agnostic, and still going to mass and being a good girl because I didn't have an alternative. Uh, and then I went to Africa, and in the early 80s as a nurse, and I was always interested in indigenous worldviews. That wasn't very popular there, but I was always looking there. And then over the years, I've lived in Kenya, I've lived in Lesotho, I've lived in Tanzania, and I met some woman from the US, and look white, but from the Cree tradition. And I did a series of sweat lodges with her here in Ireland, following the Wheel of the Year, which was interesting. And I loved it. I just loved the Nature Connect. It was just fascinating. And then I have a very close friend, a healer from Tanzania, Shaban Kalula. And I had initiations with him. You know, he introduced me into his clan, all of that stuff. And it was wonderful. But none of it came from my landscape. And that was one of my frustrations that, yes, I've been invited into these worlds, but they're not my worlds. So I wasn't appropriating anything. I was invited in, but still, uh, it didn't call to me. And then I just this book. I was actually with Shaban, my friend, in a bookshop in Dublin, the modern day Druidress by Cassandra Easton. Just as these do, I've had books pop out from shelves at me over the years. You know, really, really auspicious books that have set me down a particular pathway. And this was one such book, and it was a very pragmatic approach to Druidry. And she mentioned Obod, the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And she said she had trained with them and she was a solitary Druid and she didn't like groups, but she said she recommended the training. And of course, I thought, this is great. I don't like groups. I just want to be a solitary Druid. Now, that turned out to be a great lie. But I signed up and I've never looked back. And it was interesting. Shaban was with me the summer I joined, and on the Bardic grade, on the first, you get for the first year, you get every month you get 4 lessons, and then for each of the festivals on the Wheel of the Year, you get a ritual book. And he was there, and I got my first one, which happened to be for the autumn equinox. And we were running a workshop, and we decided to do this ritual. And he said, "You've been given a key. Now you need to continue following the Wheel of the Year on your land." And I've been doing that for over 20 years now, 21, 22 years. He gave me permission, and that's how it's been ever since. So Druidry, actually, in Ireland, it's not hard to be a Druid. It's not hard to be out. I taught in a seminary for 27 years, human development. Everybody knew what I did, that I was a priestess, I'm a Druid, never had to hide anything, unlike, let's say, in many places in the US or other parts of the world. And just scratch beneath the surface, and it's there.
I love how you spoke about traveling in different parts of the world and being invited into the spirits of the land and that form of ancestor honoring, and yet it didn't feel like your land. And I get the appropriation period. That is part of what happened to me too. I was so in connection with this land here, and yet I'm not Indigenous or Native American. And so I started feeling drawn to that culture because it's such deep reverence to the spirits of the earth. And yet I didn't want to culturally appropriate. And that's why I was like, where am I from? Where do my people come from? And how can I work with my ancestors? And it's interesting how there's kind of like a fine line of cultural appropriation and just being yourself with spirit.
You see, and also you have a responsibility to connect with the spirits of the lands where you live.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not just you can only deal with your ancestors back in Kerry. It's also wherever you live in the US or wherever you
Yes.
find yourself in the world, you have to connect with the spirits of place and the ancestors there. And that's that tension. So I don't have that tension because I live where I belong.
Exactly. And
But
the
for others who
tension,
don't, but yet there is that need to connect with the spirits of the land, the spirits of the place. Otherwise, you're not honoring the land. And so it's that.
exactly.
Excuse me.
And that's kind of what I've come to understand is that in connection and in honoring where I am, that's part of the healing. That's part of the healing of the energy of this land and the trauma and the beauty. And so it's about both. So anyhow, so going back to the culture of the Celts, the culture of the Druids, I would love to hear what actually is a Druid and what is it not, because I feel like people have all sorts of ideas. And I also feel like there isn't one hard or fast truth, is what I'm understanding, because you can be a Christian and a Druid. You can be polytheistic believer and a Druid. You can be a Buddhist and a Druid. What does it mean to you? Can you enlighten us?
Okay. So I'm only speaking for the order. Okay.
Okay.
I think there may be some druids that say you can't be a Christian and a druid, but
Hmm.
within our order, I think diversity is the healthiest of environments, diverse environments. So there isn't. I don't think you can define what druidry is. Druids themselves didn't define themselves. They didn't write anything down. Everything, theirs was an oral tradition. All knowledge, wisdom was kept in the head. And thanks to the Roman accounts of Druids in Gaul and Britain, and then the Christian monks in Ireland, that we have some notion or some mention of Druids. So for me, I would describe Druidry as a nature-based spiritual path where we look to the landscape and the seasons as a metaphor for our lives. And part of our training is around developing our own inner world, our inner grove. And it's very, very important to have a healthy, rich inner world that also needs to be in sync with the external landscape and the seasons. And that notion that when our inner world is in sync with the outer world, the outer landscape, then there's harmony and balance in our lives. And we do that by following the wheel of the year. Now, the wheel of the year is a modern invention, okay? So it honors the 4 fire festivals, which appear in our, well, 3 of them do. Bealtaine, Lunasa and Samhain appear in our stories. They don't mention Imbolc. And then the solar festivals are not mentioned, but they're there in the landscape with our great monuments, with the solar alignments to the solstices and the equinox. So for me, the wheel of the year is a beautiful synthesis of, we say, our Celtic ancestors and our pre-Celtic ancestors. And Druidry is an organic spiritual path that's relevant for these times with roots in the past. Now, we don't know how our Druidic ancestors, what exactly they did with their rituals. However, when you read the poetry and the myths, you can infer that it was very much a strong nature-based spiritual path with a connection with the landscape, with sacred sites, sacred spaces, powerful places in the land, and also with our ancestors. And our music, our bardic heritage, with the myths, the legends, the poetry, all part of it, and then weaving in healing and magic. And the Irish word for Druidry and the Irish word for magic is the same. It's Triacht.
Oh,
We
that's
talk,
beautiful.
and we talk within an Obad, one of the 7 gifts of magic, or of Druidry, one is magic. Now, it's not, we do use wands. We use wands to cast circles, not to turn people into frogs. And our magic is not about controlling and manipulating and summoning. It's about manifesting stuff and discovering and spotting the magic in the landscape. So if you listen to children talking about magic, or adults who have a fascination with beauty or nature, and they'll use that word magic, that's what we're talking about. But most people who are having a magical moment know exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's actually like opening that little portal of your own spirit and being able to tap into the realm of the beauty and the energy and the essence of spirit and everything. That is magic.
Now, there are ceremonial magicians who are druids and those who are not, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about not ordinary magic, but the magic that's implicit in the landscape and all around us.
So when we talk about the history being given in an oral tradition, and we also know that first the Roman conquistadors affected like ancient Celtic practices, and then Christianity did. And we know that history is usually written by the oppressor. How do you feel like some of these oral traditions managed to stay authentic, or did they? Does it matter?
I don't know. We don't know. So now the military Romans never came to Ireland. It was the Christian Romans that came.
Okay.
So the military Romans, they conquered Britain, and according to their writings, they didn't like the Druids, and their brief was to destroy the power of the Druids, and which they did largely. And there was a great big battle on Unismán, which is modern day Anglesey, where there was a mass slaughter of Druids. Some say some escaped to Ireland. Maybe they did. Who knows? And then we had our own Druids here. And listening, when you read, you'll find in a number of the texts in a story, Druids travelled back and forth between these islands to learn different ways. So there was always traveling back and forth with the islands. Um,
Um, keep going,
so
sorry.
when we talk about what's authentic, I don't know. And if you get into that question, you end up looking for the one true grove, just like major religions do. Theirs is the one true church. And if you look at different Christian sects, one is better than the other, and the others are all going to hell. It's the same with Islam and perhaps with others. So we don't get into that. Uh, what we honor is or recognize is that we have ancient roots, but it is not an unbroken lineage. Uh, and it's about that, for example, we've just come through Samhain, and many Druids and pagans would say, Samhain marks, it's the Celtic New Year. Actually, there's no evidence that that is the case.
Hmm.
One academic borrowed it from another, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean it can't be, as long
Mhm.
as you're not making claims that this is ancient. Because, um, like Druidry and any kind of spiritual path needs to be organic,
Yeah,
or you
well,
get locked in, gets carved in stone and then gets locked in fundamentalism and doesn't move with the times. I'm not talking about whimsy, but I'm talking about being able to make sense. So my Druidry comes to me from my landscape where I live here. The land speaks to me, or the spirits of the land speak to me. That's all I can say. We don't have a big book. We don't have a list of sins and commandments, and we don't talk about sin, but we do talk about ethics. We do talk about taking responsibility for your actions, looking at your actions through an ethical lens, living through from your own internal moral compass, rather than relying on a list of do's and don'ts. And when you do look at other religions, you see how good and how helpful the big book has been.
right, exactly. Just a few wars here and there around the world, conquering
Exactly.
people who think differently.
I'm
Well,
not
that,
against a big book. I'm not against any religion or spiritual path having a good book. It's because texts are important. It's how you use them, of course.
yeah. And when I listen to you, it just makes me think of how important our personal um, understanding of our own divinity inside of us is what should be our guiding force into the relationship with the rest of the world, seen and unseen. And it takes the power out of some sort of external source and brings the truth into your heart. And that's where the wisdom is cultivated, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so one thing that I find curious, and I'm curious how you feel about this, is when I look at indigenous culture here in North America, basically it was a genocide. It was a complete loss of culture on this land here. And that is part of why it's so important not to be culturally appropriating people who completely lost their culture, right? Um, but that genocide was a brutal, you can't even say really an assimilation into Christianity, because even those boarding schools where they brought indigenous children were places of torture, really. And so I sometimes compare and I look back and contrast what happened to ancient, like Celtic or Druidic culture. And you see so much assimilation, but I don't know the history of what truly happened. If I was wondering if you could talk about that.
There was when Christianity came. Well, Saint Patrick is the the Christian icon here, but he wasn't the first Christian to come here. There were already Christians here. Some, came from the not Roman Christians, but from that ethos of the Desert Fathers. They would be, considered Celtic for the want of a better word. Just use the word Celtic very lightly, okay?
Okay.
Where it was very, very much a nature-based Christian way of being. There was no mass conversion like in other countries where you know people were forced to convert. None of that happened here. It was much more gentle.
Yeah.
And it is believed, we still don't know, that maybe many of the Druids converted and became monks, but lots of abbeys were set up, churches, universities. Um, After the fall of Rome, we had the Dark Ages, but it was the Golden Age here in Ireland. It was known as the Island of Saints and Scholars. So there were universities all over the land, and people from overseas would have sent, the Saxon kings sent their children to be educated in Ireland. And then missionaries left Ireland to go to Europe to found monasteries there. But it was in, when was it, 660 was the Council of Whitby, and that was when the Saxon king, that's in Britain, decided to go with the rule of Rome as opposed to the rule of Iona. But the rule of Rome then took over in Britain, and it remained the same. It wasn't the rule of Rome in Ireland. So you had men and women living together in monasteries. You had abbesses and you had abbots. So men and women living together, married, dedicating their lives to God and to the service of the community. They had children. So it wasn't until when, I suppose, with the first Norman invasion, when the Pope sent the Normans with the various orders like the Benedictines, the Dominicans, the other, I can't remember the other orders, to destroy the power of the independent abbeys, and they succeeded. So then the rule of Rome came in. But then again, the second Norman invasion, they came and settled, mixed with the Irish people. There was always that veneer of Christianity over people's nature-based connection with the landscape. Rome really only took a strong hold in Irish Catholicism after the famine. Now, Catholicism was banned in Ireland during colonial times with the penal laws. We weren't allowed to practice our religion. Priests, if they were caught, would have been killed. I remember in school, this was quite scary. Would you die for your faith? And hearing stories of so that no services could be held in churches, so people went out into the wild areas and held services on what were known as mass rocks, but they would have been megalithic tombs. And
Right.
stories of the community are there, the priest is saying mass, and then they can see the redcoats, the English army coming, and then some young man would say, "Father, give me your robes," and they'd switch clothes. The redcoats would come and they would hang the man wearing the priest's robes and the robe. The priest would survive to tend to his flock for another day, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't until after the famine, when people were really, really broken, that the Catholic Church really took a strong hold again. It was a way of people sending their children into religious life. They could get an education, they could get fed.
Yeah.
So we were very, very broken after the famine. So,
Can you
and
tell
then when
me?
we got, go on. So then
Oh,
we
I
got
was gonna.
independence. We adopted very much a Roman Catholic constitution.
Just for reference, what years were the famine?
1845 to about 1851. Oh,
Okay.
it kind of, it was 45, 46, 47, 48, that kind of thing. And then kind of on a little bit. So it was kind of, the hunger ended, I suppose, by 1851.
Okay, so I'm going to go way back to something you were talking about at the very beginning of kind of that educating moment here. You talked about all the different people who would send their children or, to learn from the scholars in Ireland. Have you heard the story that Jesus was supposedly also educated either on that island or other islands around there? Do you think that's one of those folkloric things
I
that
think they're lovely.
people?
I love those stories. What
Mhm.
they say, he came to Glastonbury in the
Right.
UK with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who was a merchant, and he would come from the Far East to Britain to deal in tin, and so would sail up the British Channel, came to an Esquitrin, which, because in Somerset levels, the water levels were up, so an Esquitrin, which is like the Glastonbury, was an island,
Mhm.
and they say Jesus came here, or sorry, there. Sorry, we have our gatherings in Glastonbury. That's why I'm saying here. they say Bridget came to Glastonbury. There's a church dedicated to her. Some of her artifacts she left there. And they say, yes, perhaps Jesus did, but it's a lot, it's folklore.
It
It's
is
not,
folklore. And
it's not
I,
written in any text. And the thing is, it's a nice story. The important thing is that we recognize folklore as folklore, not that might
mhm,
contain truths, but not facts.
yeah,
As people get
I,
really angry, we'll fight over this. And it's like, no, no, I think it's a nice story. Who's to say he didn't? Because there are also stories that Jesus went to India and he studied with the Egyptians. And so who knows? All of it's possible because there's no account of him from the time he was 12 till he was 30. So who's
right.
didn't?
And then if you look at all of the different aspects of the earth-based beliefs, but also big religions, there's so many different stories that all have the same similarities. And so it's almost like that story of Jesus traveling around the world is one way to bond and bind people to each other. But it's also true. I mean, you look at like um, in Greek mythology is like Gaia. In Christian mythology, there's Mother Mary. In Hindu mythology, it's Devi. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but you could go on and on to the different beliefs. And so that kind of brings me back to one of the titles that we started talking about for you as a priestess of Isis and Danu. And I was wondering if you could talk about that because those are different parts of the world as well. And yet I imagine there's some sort of spiritual link for
Well,
you.
the Fellowship of Isis was founded in Ireland.
Okay, tell me more.
So by Olivia Robertson and her brother Lawrence and his wife Pamela, and in 1976, and in Huntington Castle, and that's where they were brought up. And that Huntington Castle was a foundation for esoteric studies. And Olivia Robinson was very friendly with Ross Nicholson, who was the founder of OBOT.
Mhm.
And Philip, my predecessor, and so Olivia and Ross were good friends. Philip, Ross Nicholson was one of Philip's teachers, so was Olivia. Philip spent a year when he was 18, 19, studying with Olivia in Huntington Castle. Olivia was a friend of mine. So each of the chosen chiefs had a friendship with Olivia Robertson. So
Mhm.
for me, I don't know why they chose Isis, but it was like Isis is the one of 10,000 names, the Great Mother. And so my connection is generally with Irish deities from my land. But when I met Olivia, she wanted to know did I have connections with Irish deities. That was her interest, and I did. And then I started going to the temple, and then she said, "I'm going to ordain you," and that's what she did. Because anyway, that's what Olivia did. She was a very interesting woman. So my connection is Danu, like Isis, is the mother, like the Tuatha Dé Danann is the tribes of Danu. So Danu is the mother of the gods and goddesses of Ireland. Now there are no stories about Danu.
I tried to find some. There's none. And
That's
yet
that
she is still
mystery.
known. Yeah.
Yes, but that's that mystery.
Yeah.
And one of the things about in Druidry is that there is mystery, and science is always trying to unravel mysteries and trying to reduce life down to a few formulas that we can make sense of, and it keeps failing because there scientific inquiry and scientific discovery is really, really important. This is how we evolve. However, we must never ever reveal all of the mystery.
And we couldn't
And we can't.
anyways. Yeah.
No, so Danu is that uh, she's noble and she's unknowable.
What do you mean?
Well, it's that mysterious thing. You know when you it's like you hold a mist, you can see it, and then you reach your hands out to contain it, and then it just slips through your fingers and it goes in its own terms. And I think that's what mystery is, and it maybe and divinity is like that. You can't own it, control it, but it envelops you,
Hmm.
surrounds you. You can welcome it in, and then it just flows away and it comes back. And
That's beautiful.
and we have, you know, in lots of our mythology, stories of the Fé Fia, the Ciodriachta, that magical mist or a mist of invisibility that can actually protect you from your enemies or confuse the enemy. It is there as a wrap, a cloak of protection and mystery that you can never control. It just comes and goes as is needed.
Mm. Can you talk about some of the gods and goddesses of Ireland and um, what that means in Druidic tradition or
Well,
ritual?
in um, not all of our memories, our members in the order are theistic. Some are animistic, and some are even atheistic. And then, of course, we have members all over the world that may not be working with the Irish deity because some, like the Norse gods or the Germanic ones or wherever they are in the world. So, I mean, we have characters that come in the story. So you have, I'm a celebrant of legal pagan weddings, and as part of the ritual, I always tell the Angus, Og, and Care story. And Angus is the Celtic god of love. Bridget is, I suppose, a really important goddess because she's also a saint. So I think, or it is believed that um, her importance was so strong that with Christianity she morphed into sainthood, and that's never gone. So there are, you know, we now have a national holiday to honor Bridget. That only came in 2023. So you will have Christians and pagans alike honoring both the saint and the goddess. And there are some wonderful stories about the saint, mostly, and about, you know, but honoring her pre-Christian power. She's the triple goddess. She's the maiden, the mother, the crone. She's an important goddess. There's the Marian, the great queen, the Morrigan. There's Macha. So Bive, Macha, and the Marian are represented by as crows or ravens. They carry the spirits of the slain to the other world. They can be associated with battle, but it's not all battle. Then you have Andaya, the good god. He's known as the father of the gods and goddesses, but he and Danu weren't consorts. Boann is the great cow goddess. She gives her name to the river Boyne. There's Maeve, the goddess. Maeve comes from the kind of the intoxicator of men. She was a warrior. She was fearsome. She represented sovereignty in the land. So if a king had to lie with the goddess in order to gain his kingship.
Oh,
And a good king was someone who honored that sovereignty, and that was demonstrated by abundance, good weather, good crops, peace, prosperity in the land. And if war came or pestilence or a drought or a famine came, that was seen as a reflection that the king had breached or broken or hadn't honored sovereignty of the land, but that the king must lie with the goddess, she being the land, the earth, in order to maintain his kingship.
that is okay, amazing on a couple of different levels because I think of the power then as being in the divine feminine, right? And that is what the land is.
Yes.
And so it's almost like the gods and the goddesses are representations of these powers inside of us to connect to. Or would you agree with that? Am I?
I think so. And then we have, you know, the three sisters, Eru, Fola, and Banva, and they were the goddesses, the triple goddesses in Ireland when the sons of Mill came. These were the Milesians.
Yes.
And Aragon, the Druid of the one of the sons of Mill, he negotiated with the three goddesses, and he asked if they would confer sovereignty, hand over sovereignty to the sons of Mill, and they said yes, as long as you call Ireland after me, and he promised each one of them, but he called it Era after Eru. So I think it is the divine feminine, and so the sons of Mill defeated the Tuatha, but I think it was almost like it was written in the stars that new people would come,
Hmm.
and that the reign of the Tuatha was over, but that they would remain in Ireland, but in the Hollow Hills, and then the Celts or the Milesians would occupy Ireland above the
So,
ground, and then
so
there was
then
go on. Sorry.
and I'm gonna, you say it so melodically and beautiful, but the Tuatha were ultimately, they lost to the Milesians in this great battle of the ancient land. And then those folk became the fairy folk that lived in the hills. Is that true?
Well, we're talking about
Supposedly.
folk. Yeah, yeah. So either they're seen as the gods and goddesses that are still in the other world, or people have different ways of seeing them. Yeah, the good folk, the shiny, the Dini she. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so that just kind of brings me into then the stories of the fairy, the stories of the fae in Ireland, modern day now. People talk about the ring forts and the not demolishing certain yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that would be considered really, really important. Although many
Yes.
of them have been damaged, but
Yeah.
there's plenty of examples where they have been damaged, and bad things happen to the people who damage them.
Hmm.
So you will see a skeach. A skeach is an Irish word for a hawthorn tree. And when you see a single skeach, that is recognized as a portal to the other world. And often you'll see that in one in the middle of a ploughed field
Hmm.
where the farmer has ploughed all around it but has not touched the tree. And
Hmm.
okay, that's a local skeach that is honoured as a portal into the other world, and you do not harm it. You'll see there's a famous story. We have a storyteller called Eddie Lenihan from Clare, and they were widening the road in County Clare, but where they wanted to widen there was a skeach, and it was a tree that people would have put cluties on and prayer ties and things like that onto it. So it wasn't just, oh, it's a lone skeach. It actually had a lot of importance for people looking for healing, for intentions, etc. And there was a huge campaign, and they had to divert the road around that skeach. And in County Offaly, where I come from, again they were widening the road, and there's a skeach there in a place called Sarkieran, and the people still go sunwise. So they don't. So most people will go on the new road just back and forth. Local people just always go sunrise when the sunwise, honoring going around that tree sunwise
Oh,
with their.
that makes me happy. It's like how it should be, right? I just love the incorporation of honoring history and divinity and crossing that realm of physical to spirit in our modern lives. And so, as someone who is a druid now, and you have been for a very long time, and you're the highest in your order, what does that mean for you in your daily life? Is it just a part of your own spiritual personal practice? How does it affect your community? What is the role of Druid in community? Does there have to be a role?
Okay, so I live in the country, so I am immersed. When I first came, uh, because when I met my second husband, he was already living here, just not a long time. He and his first wife had come here, and she died after 9 months. So that my garden was a field, just grass. It's full now. I have no more room to plant any more trees.
Mm.
I overlook the River Nore, wherein lies the Fola, one of the three sister goddesses. So I'm immersed in a historical, ancient site, and when I joined the order, and like when I said, my friend Shaban gave me the key and said, "This is the key. Now you need to hold this." We started a Druid community then. This is long
Mhm.
before I even went to I mean, I was a member of the order, but I was studying here by distance, and I hadn't gone to any gatherings. So we have a Druid community here. Well, it's more than Druid. It's a very eclectic community. Not everybody identifies as a Druid, and it doesn't matter. But what they do is they come to honor the Wheel of the Year, and we've been doing that since 2003.
Yeah.
And so we have our ceremonies outside, and people bring food, and then we have a night court, which is honoring people bring their bardic talents or a listening ear, and we share that in a very safe environment. So for me, my Druidry really has created a lovely community for me. And I live in Kilkenny, but I'm not from Kilkenny. So I have friends who live locally as well, and very important, but there are local people who come to the ceremonies, and then people from outside Kilkenny come. So one of the big things that many members of the order will say, that once they joined the order, they felt they could come home. They had found their tribe, their family, their community, and that has been my experience. So it's there all the time, because I'm looking out at my landscape. I can't avoid the seasons. I can't avoid the which is lovely. So my Druidry isn't like, we'll say, am I a Sunday, just a Sunday Christian, or a Friday Muslim, or whatever it is. No, it's there all the time. That doesn't mean I'm constant meditation and constantly praying. I'm also living in the real world as well. But it's around me. And then within the order, we did, like, for example, last night we had an online healing ritual. It's the 5th one we've had for the public. We do it twice a year. We will have we do our online ceremonies to mark the Wheel of the Year for those who can't attend a physical grove or a seed group. So we have, then I have my own fireside chats on a Thursday that go broadcast live, where I interview a member of the order. Philip, my predecessor, he does a tea on a Monday. We have all sorts of circles within the order on climate change, listening, a mental health group, all sorts of things that we have. So it's busy.
It's amazing. It's so full. And it's interesting because I think of like Christianity or something, because I'm most closely associated that growing up Roman Catholic as well. There's Christianity wants to go and save people, wants people to find their way externally to God. And when I hear you talking and I hear the community of it, we just want to help people find their truth, or we want to help people if they want to be helped, or right? There's a difference there.
Absolutely, yeah, because we don't have a monopoly on the truth, and we
Yes.
don't proselytize. So if you'd like to join, and the thing is, so many of our members will react against maybe their primary religious upbringing for various reasons, and they'll say, I will never ever be a whatever it is, and now I've discovered Druidry and this is what I am. Fine. And then there are others go, no, I still want to bring my Buddhism or my Christianity or my Judaism or whatever it is in there, because it has a value. And you say, fine, absolutely. So the teachings are, or the lessons are, it's around, this is your personal path. So here are the teachings. Everybody gets the same lessons. Now, you're going to follow at your own pace, in your own way, whenever it feels right for you to do this. And you're going to reflect on it. So it's a spiritual development path, but it's also a personal development path, but that you reflect on how you engage with each of these lessons. You reflect on your experience of any of the rituals you've done, how you work with the elements, how you develop your own creativity, how you engage with say, a sacred site, or how you engage with a tree, how you find the song of the earth. Each one, it's an individual, and there's no such thing as a good Druid. I don't know what that looks like,
I love that.
we don't look for piety. It's about you being the best version of who you are.
It's
And
like when you said we have no monopoly on the truth, like that's freedom and that's personal power. And that's saying, I'm not giving you my personal power to connect me to my divine source. It's saying my divine source is here. And I just love that. That's beautiful.
I think, yeah, ours is Obat is the largest Druid order in the world, and I think, and since I took over in 2020, the rate of membership has doubled. Now, I'd love to think that was because of me. It's not. I think it's this is the time. So when you think of the pandemic we've been through, the way that the climate is going, and the madness in the world, and whatever it is we offer, somehow it offers people freedom to think for themselves and to follow a path, a spiritual path in their own way, and make sense of it. Those who are looking for certainty, they're on the wrong bus if they're coming to Obod, because we don't have any certainty. We don't have any fundamentalist rules and regulations. But for those who want to be able to think for themselves and reflect for themselves and take responsibility, the door is open. And I think that brings with it so much freedom that people are crying for that.
Absolutely. Can you speak to the three strands of Obad? So of Druidry, the Bard, the Ovate,
Yeah.
and the Druid. And I just have one question before you start speaking to that. Like when I was reading about the three strands, like I felt very drawn into the Ovate just because of the way that I work between the realms. And I'm just curious, like how, just talk about it. And I'm sure my
Okay.
question will be
So
answered.
you start as a bard. You start on
Mhm.
the bardic path because I mean, I struggled on the bardic path because I wanted to be an ovate. Okay. So I was 7 years, 7 years on the bardic path before I could plow my way through it. So the bardic one is around you tapping into and developing your own creativity through your engagement with the elements in the landscape.
Mhm.
And in that year, you're invited to explore the wheel of the year. So it takes a minimum of 1 year. You can take
Mhm.
as long as the lessons come for a year, and then you have all the lessons, and you can spend as long as you like, digesting those.
Mhm.
And tapping into that creativity is really, really important. So the bards were the poets, the musicians, the history keepers, the storytellers, and they had an important role. That they moderated the behavior of the king, because if a king wasn't honoring sovereignty, a bard could write a nasty satire or a praise poem, depending. The Ovid is the shamanic strand, the one who navigates time and navigates easily between this world and the other world. Star lore, healing, herb lore, divination. That's that ovate strand. And then the druid strand is the philosophical strand. That's the teacher, the ethicist, the one of service, the ritual holder. Now, on my bardic, I did all of those things. So it's not that you can't do that because you're only a bard. You're not allowed to be a herbalist. We don't work that way. This is the path that you follow: bard, ovate, and then druid, if you so choose. Some people remain as bards for the rest of their lives and don't pursue the other two. That's
Mhm.
fine. There's no higher. What's lovely about Obod is there's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
So we don't say, well, you're only up, so you can't do this. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. Because I don't know. Even among my friends, I wouldn't know what within the order of what grade they are. It's not important.
It doesn't matter. And it's so personal. Again, it's about your relationship to divinity
Exactly.
and the physical, realm. It's your personal path. Um, I had someone who really wanted me to ask you about the sacred sites, who wanted to ask about, there's so many different standing stones and so many different sacred sites. And Newgrange is a big one where my understanding is there's some sort of like death and rebirth with the solstice that happens there. But obviously, my
Okay, so
understanding is small.
Newgrange is aligned to, and we have our own, like Newgrange, Knockrow in South Kilkenny that I go to. I don't go to Newgrange, not for the solstice. So there's with Newgrange, it's an incredible monument. It looks beautiful on the outside, and then inside, on the like for the 3 days at the winter solstice at sunrise, there's a lottery now. People go, and so many people are allowed inside, and then when the sun rises and hits through the light box, it kind of winds its way through a narrow passage and then fills this chamber with light. So it represents the masculine principle entering into the womb of the mother.
Oh,
And after that point, then the days. So we've gone into the dark time of the year. The days are getting shorter and shorter, and the nights are getting longer and longer until midwinter. And then after that, penetration of the light into the womb of the mother, the days, the sun has been reborn, and the days are getting longer and longer. The nights are getting shorter and shorter. So
mm,
it's about rebirth.
beautiful. And what about, I mean, there are standing stones and sacred sites all over
Yep.
the island. And do they each have separate significance? Or what do you
It,
find? Or what do you
where I am
feel?
well, it's a bit like different pieces of music have different resonances for people. So it's the same. Um, in Knockrow, we have in South Kilkenny, there's two passage tombs aligned to the winter solstice, one at the sunrise and one at the sunset. That's rare.
Mm,
And it's maybe the same age as Newgrange, the same kind of stone are used, but everything, it mirrors. I don't know, does Knockrow mirror Newgrange or Newgrange mirror Knockrow? Both are in a valley, a river valley. Both are in the bend of a river. They
mm,
use the same kind of stones, but in the Lingon Valley, where Knockrow is, all those stones were found located in the valley. Where the one in Newgrange, they imported, I think, 3 different types of stone. There were only 2 kinds located in the valley. They found between the cremated remains, between 50 and 100 people between the 2 passage tombs in Knockrow, and they found the remains of 5 people in Newgrange. So
wow.
Newgrange was rebuilt. We don't know, was it covered, with the beautiful quartz all around and the green at the top. Knockrow was never rebuilt. They didn't put the capstone on. It's a much plainer thing. So I've only 3 times have I seen the sun hit the stones at the sunrise, and only once at the sunset.
Mm,
But magical nonetheless. So there's little piles of quartz there. So maybe quartz were used as amplifiers in these sacred sites. And that would have at one point been covered over completely, but now we see the bare stones as we see in many of these sacred sites. They would have once been covered over. The
yeah.
portal tombs or the passage tombs or the dolmens would have been covered, but they're standing stones. Yes, so when people look to the sky and you watch, you say, on a particular date or a particular time of the year, for example, the moon is seen to rise up a hill in certain areas. I mean, all of that's magical, that our ancestors, how sophisticated they were to have spotted those patterns and created alignments of stones to correspond with that. It's again mystery. So, Knockrow is about 5,000 BC. Is it 5,000 years old? Yeah, but it would have had different uses at different times by
Yeah.
different peoples.
Yeah, and different ages and different phases of consciousness development and like where we were as humans. And I just love thinking about that. And I'm so excited to go to Ireland and just to be out at night with the stars up above and to feel whatever it is that I feel. In a lot of indigenous cultures in North America, they feel a deep connection, like coming from, the Pleiadian star system, or there's like this deep connection to the Syrians and star system. And is there anything like that that you hear of in oral tradition? In
Not so much in oral tradition, but people talk about it. But whether
Yeah,
this is, uh, it is believed that some of our stories are descriptions of comets.
right. Yeah, interesting.
But I think stars were important, but you know, we have Balak and Bofina, that describes the Milky Way, and that
Mhm.
is the way of the white cow, and Boan is the white cow goddess. So there would have been mirroring above and in terms of
Below.
constellations, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But whether and I haven't seen it written, but I don't know if it's Cuchulainn is Orion. So Cuchulainn's belt is Orion's belt. Who knows? We don't know.
And well, and that's part of the mystery. That's part of it's so fun to think about. But again, it's the mystery, and go into the mystery in your own heart and go into the mystery and experience that, but maybe be comfortable never knowing, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Eimear, you are such a wealth of knowledge, and I could sit by a fire and talk to you for days. I would love that. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this podcast. And I want to talk about OBUD because I am going to sign up. I spent all night last night just looking through all of the
Mm.
beautiful ways of learning more and cultivating the practices for myself. But maybe you could talk to our listeners.
Well, you can find our website is druidry.org, and that is a wealth of information on Druidry.
Mhm.
Um, I trained with them, so I would say I was really, really happy with my Druidic the teachings or the lessons that I had. But there's that piece, and it provided, even though I've been practicing beforehand, it provided a beautiful framework for me. It got me back into my own Irish language, into the Irish myths, because there's a lot of emphasis on the Welsh myths. Nothing wrong with that. Got me, just opened doorways for me to go deeper into my own landscape, and I thought that was just wonderful. And even though we've members all over with people in the Southern Hemisphere, you're also encouraged to engage with the spirits of your own place and make sense from your own landscape. So, and that is incredibly freeing for people who want to explore Druid. It's also frustrating because you're not given any answers. You have to work those out yourself. And
Mhm.
that is beautiful, but it's also challenging. Uh, People will say it's a homecoming, there's a community. And even for people who, and this is, I suppose, one of the positives coming out of the pandemic is that we were forced to go online, and with the capability, the online capability has grown hugely in the last 4 years, and now the OBOD community is getting smaller and smaller as it's getting bigger and bigger because
Mhm.
people now have online connections. So here I'm very lucky. I've always had physical contact with other druids. And then when COVID happened, then I met lots of people in the US who live in an area or a state where they can't come out to their family or their work, wherever they are. And then they find, oh my goodness, I now have a cohort of people. I have a community, and it's an online community, and I can meet people whenever I want. And I am no longer alone.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
that's what it is. It's that community. It's about bringing people together. And because we share not beliefs, but we share values
Yeah.
of that. We are all nature. We're all part of that incredible web of interconnectedness throughout the planet and beyond. And that's what draws us together, rather than my wand is stronger than yours and my grove is more powerful. That's not what we're talking about. Or I believe I'm a monotheist and you're a polytheist, so therefore you're better than me or less than, or whatever it is. We don't argue about any of that. It's about what brings us together.
Sounds like a path of healing for our planet.
Yep, I think
One
so.
of them. Yes. Well, I want to say thank you again for being here. And thank you for all our listeners who are here for this episode. And I will see you next time.
Lovely talking to you, Erica.
Thank you so much.